This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
Hey, warmer from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We're going to be joined in a few minutes by one of our good buddies, Rob Donaldson. He does such amazing work over at the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. We're going to chat with him about the dynamic that we're seeing here in the postseason. If he does believe that the LA Dodgers are pretty much an unstoppable force, if they're not an unstoppable force, who might be able to shut them down? The keys for the Brewers to be able to make this a little bit of a series. How he takes a look at that Seattle Mariners versus Toronto Blue Jays series, both with regards to the entirety of the series and what we're going to be seeing in game number 3 and just the overall styles of play of these four teams. And if there's anything that he does different with regards to handicapping this time of year than he does throughout the regular season. Rob's such a wealth of knowledge. We're going to get him aboard in the second segment in a few minutes, as our recap segments are now very, very short with having only 1 or 2 games every single day. And we will be recapping the game 2 of Dodgers versus Brewers here in segment number 1. And then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis for game 3 of Mariners versus Blue Jays as we touch them all. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, LRCM, name does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to access their funds whenever and wherever. With EdgeBoost, 100% of gambling transactions do get approved. You get cashback rewards as you use EdgeBoost as well. And when you go to edgeboost.bet, make sure you utilize that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That gets you a $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's take a look back at what we saw in Brewers versus LA Dodgers on Tuesday in that game number 2. Try to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Been seeing quite a few unders in baseball over the last week or so, and for the LA Dodgers, he's trying the bases loaded in the 8th and 9th inning to be able to get you this under, but boy, oh boy, did they get the job done in this one by a count of 5-1. Freddie Peralta, he comes in for 5 2/3 innings, gives up 3 runs, including a pair of bombs. Max Muncy is first of the postseason, and Teoscar Hernandez, number 4 of the playoffs. And from there, the bullpen made a mess of things. Abner Uribe gives up a run in 2/3 of an inning. Aaron Ashby was able to get a pair of outs out of the bullpen squirrels. Same with Robert Gasser, but Tobias Myers, he gives up a run as well. And for Grant Anderson, he did a nice job coming on for Gasser, being able to strand the bases loaded on 2 pitches. And Yoshinobu Yamamoto, a complete game. He allowed a home run in the first inning. Jackson Chourio settles down from there, 111 pitches, so the Dodgers do not need to go to the bullpen at all. Brewers only 3 hits in this one, and that's a favorite that's able to get on the board. And over the last 7 days in Major League Baseball, home teams have not necessarily had a big advantage here in the postseason, as home teams are 6-6 overall on the money line in the last 7 days. But right now in the championship series, home teams are 0-4. The Blue Jays are down 0-2, the Brewers are down 0-2, and the favorites are just 4-7 on the money line. We had one pick'em game along the way as well, and 8 out of the last 12 postseason games have gone under the total. So that's what we're seeing in baseball right now, and that's what we're all getting trend-wise. We have to talk about this entire postseason with our good friend Rob Donaldson. He does great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. We're going to be taking a look to see if the Brewers have any sort of a shot in this series. We'll be taking a look forward to Game 3 of Mariners versus Blue Jays, and the Blue Jays prospects of being able to come back as well. That's on the flip side right here on the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Rob Donaldson aboard. He does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, taking a look at this great game of baseball that we all know and love. I know he's also doing excellent work on the college football front. He's getting set, much like myself, for an amazing college basketball season. You name it, he does it. He's over at Underdogs Fantasy. He's over at youtube.com/Rob Donaldson and the old Twitter/X at RobDFB. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be joining you today, Greg. And man, we're down to 4 teams. We've been talking about baseball since it was, 3 months out to the season, the regular season that is. And now we're sitting here at kind of the tail end, and hopefully we get some good series out of these final 2 ALCS and NLCS games. But ultimately, it's been a crazy year. It's been a fun year. And even some of these playoff series have really delivered, which is definitely a good thing.
Now, we do not know the result of game number 2 between the Brewers and the Dodgers at the time of recording, but right now the Brewers are very much against it. And how much do you think that they might be able to push this LA Dodgers team? Because I just look at these 4 teams remaining, and I recognize that the Mariners are up 2-0 right now over the Blue Jays, but it just feels like with the Dodgers, the way that they were able to revamp that bullpen, having the likes of Roki Sasaki and Emmett Sheehan coming out of it, I feel like they are really the team to beat out of these 4 right now.
Yeah, and kind of my tinfoil hat moment on your show, Greg, is every single time we talk about the Brewers and that home field quote-unquote advantage, it always comes back to the fact that, is it really an advantage for a team that relies on pitching, that wants to win via small ball when they have a roof over their heads at all times? Because it kind of feels like that just leads to the Dodgers and teams that are willing to kind of go off offensively or have the makings to go off offensively to go off offensively when you have that climate control. Because, hey, if they were pitching right now, I'll tell you, in Milwaukee, here on Tuesday, and the weather is actually a factor to limit the long ball, all of a sudden, I think the Brewers might have an edge. But yeah, to your point, I don't think the Brewers are going to be able to push too much in this series. I do think, depending on how this game goes tonight, this might be their first and one and only chance to truly draw blood in this series with Freddie Peralta on the bump. But I think ultimately, in the long-term sense, I do think the Brewers are kind of outclassed in this matchup here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I do think that despite the fact that I am a Milwaukee Brewers fan, that this is going to be a little bit of a rough series for them. And what is anything that could be able to stop the LA Dodgers, whether that be in this series or whether that be in a potential World Series, which right now that's looking like the Seattle Mariners. We'll get to that in a few minutes, but that said, it just looks like the Dodgers are that team that we all thought that they were going to be towards the beginning part of the season. They just dealt with injuries, and they have gotten healthy at the perfect time.
Yeah, and when you have the Dodgers pitching staff shutting down the Phillies, potentially shutting down the Brewers for a second straight game, and you're looking at, who can stop them when they have the offense humming, when they have Roki Sasaki, Tyler Glasnow, all these arms that are just, they weren't there in the regular season for the bullpen. Now they are, and they're a crazy feature to kind of lift up this team. Who can stop them? The reality is probably not anybody. And so I think you have to kind of catch them in those weird sort of pocket games. And heck, what we're kind of finding right now is series by series, things can flip on a dime. With the Mariners going up against the Tigers, the offense really wasn't the focal point or the main driver of winning that series. It was the pitching, it was the defense, it was the situational hits against a guy like a Tariq Skubal to lift him out of the ballpark if you're Jorge Polanco. But ultimately, what we're seeing right now against the Blue Jays is, hey, yeah, we can drop 14 on your head in any game. And so I think series by series, anything can happen. But ultimately, if we're kind of banking on that consistency aspect, the Dodgers feel like the head and shoulders best team. And I would have said the Blue Jays were number 2, except for the fact that they've come out into this series and got punched in the mouth 2 times in a row.
Yep, exactly. And certainly the punches in the mouth have not been great, to say the least. So we'll see if there's going to be a little bit of bounce back there, as Rob Donaldson, who does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets, he's joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Show. And we're going to have one game coming up on Wednesday, and that's the Blue Jays trying to salvage something in this Mariners series. Because if you go down 0-3, I don't think that there's going to be any 2004 Boston Red Sox magic in them. And it is going to be George Kirby against Shane Bieber. But how do you take a look at both this game number 3 and the Blue Jays' overall outlook? Because it felt like they were in a perfect spot in game number 1, game number 2, being at home. The Mariners had to utilize every single form of ammo that they had to get past the Detroit Tigers, and they lose both games at home.
That is so deflating because, to your point, it kind of felt like the thing that was driving the Blue Jays was that offense and just this crazy good starting pitching to start the games and kind of give them that early leverage. But that did not come to fruition in those first 2 games, and the Mariners are a bullpen that we've seen just be utilized as a true weapon. And when you're looking at a guy like, a Shane Bieber take the mound, whether it's, in Seattle or in Toronto, I don't think it really matters. Right now, he's kind of a shell of his former self. He obviously didn't have the full ramp-up period of the entire regular season leading into the playoffs. He kind of is what he is right now, coming off of that injury. And because of that, I think there's going to be a massively quick hook. And he might not even be the guy who kind of, opens this game. We've seen a lot of opener usage, and that could be a strategy at play in this matchup as well, with some kind of notable sort of lefty bats that are hitting the ball well, like Josh Naylor on the front end of that lineup. But whoever they use, and you're looking at the names in their bullpen, maybe Eric Lauer is a guy that can get involved in this game. If he is the guy that gets involved in this game, I just don't feel confident with backing any sort of Blue Jays side. And so ultimately, if that's the case, where we know the Blue Jays have to score runs to stay in it, I'm going to go ahead and take an over for the full game through the first 5. That's kind of the tenor of this series that I see end up playing out here.
Yep, and I do think that that is really the way that things are looking right now. And I do think that for the Blue Jays, it's going to be rough for them. And for the Blue Jays, how big of a key do you think that it is going to be to just be able to get off to an early start? Because we saw it in game number 1. George Springer gets that solo homer, and then they don't score for the rest of the game. And then in game number 2, they fall down 3-0 very early on. And it just feels like for the Blue Jays, really the big disadvantage that they have in this series is the bullpen, because the Seattle Mariners have likes of Andres Munoz, Matt Brash being able to shut it down, and the Blue Jays' Achilles heel towards the second half of the season was the fact that that bullpen really went downward.
Yeah, and even when you are looking at the guys who maybe struggled in the early going, say like a Miguel Vargas in terms of the playoff cycle, that's somebody that I think eventually will be a weapon because his stuff is so nasty. And so how do the Blue Jays win this game? It is going to be able to, it's getting after their starters, right? You can't have them just kind of do what they want in terms of this catering bullpen usage. Everything is easy going. And that's ultimately what helped the Detroit Tigers to finally muster up some offense in that game where they score, I think, 9 or 10 runs and were able to win at home against Seattle. It's they were able to tax that Seattle pen on the Seattle bullpen day. Right now, Seattle's just kind of in their pocket, in their zone. This is obviously a best of 7 rather than a best of 5. And so there's a different approach entirely there as well. But I think ultimately what needs to happen is that offense has to kind of do what nobody's been able to do against the Mariners all season, and that is get after that bullpen and force them and ramp up their pitch counts so you can kind of get that arm fatigue at play, because I don't think this Toronto starting pitching rotation, this bullpen, is good enough to get it done just on their own against this Mariners lineup the way that they're humming right now, and that's why it kind of feels like an impossible task. But at the same time, the Mariners have been going in and out, and their home ballpark, much like the Brewers, I don't think does them much favors right now because they were hitting in that weather-controlled dome, Rogers Center, and now they're going back to T-Mobile where the temperatures are going down. It's a little bit rainy. How does that affect the offense that's going strong right now? It actually might play a detriment based on how this series is turning out so far.
Yep, and that is going to be such an interesting dynamic as well, because with the Seattle Mariners, we know that they've got some big poppers in their lineup, and I've always referred to them as being a little bit of an all-or-nothing lineup, but how much are we seeing with Seattle that they actually do have guys like Dom Canzone, J.P. Crawford that are able to move the line, and maybe they are a little bit more, shall we say, multifaceted with their offense than maybe a lot of people thought.
Yeah, and even some of the kind of designed lefty guys, like say like a Josh Naylor, are very bat to ball, right? And so in terms of, throwing a lefty or having the approach of playing these handedness matchups, sometimes you're just not going to find that strong suit because, again, to your point, you have switch hitters across the board. Even the lefties in this lineup are good at kind of having those reverse splits in a way, and even the righties hit other righties as well. And so you're kind of almost forcing your hand where if the Seattle Mariners offense isn't being hindered by the outdoor element, all of a sudden you're going up against a juggernaut where you need to score runs. The Blue Jays have been scoring runs throughout this playoff cycle, but they just need that little bit of edge in pitching. They don't need a guy to go out there and shove for 6 or 7 innings the way that Savage was doing against the Yankees. They just need a guy who's going to be able to go out there for 6 or 7 strong and give them only 3 earned runs. I think they would take that any given day. Heck, even 5 innings pitched with 3 earned runs, because this offense is ultimately what's going to win or lose the Blue Jays a series and this potentially this World Series kind of picture as well. And I don't know if the bats can overcome what's happening to them right now. But again, once we get out into that outdoor element here in October in Seattle, where T-Mobile's already kind of pitcher friendly, maybe this whole series kind of flips on its head and we have a totally different optic standpoint coming out of it here.
Yep, certainly. And I do think that it is going to be really interesting to see what we get in game number 3 and then game number 4 as well, as we actually know that it's going to be Max Scherzer going up against Luis Castillo on Thursday. And yeah, the Blue Jays are going to be an underdog in that one, but I feel like that could just be a really good spot for the over. I recognize how Seattle is very pitcher friendly, especially this time of year. It's hard to be able to hit the ball out, but Max Scherzer has been giving up the deep ball all season long. And Luis Castillo, I recognize that he's been able to keep things scoreless here in the postseason. I just haven't been impressed by him all season long as well.
Yeah, and can we see that one last, vintage Max Scherzer performance? It kind of feels like he's dead, where they should have made, the moves at the deadline that they just really didn't for that starting rotation. Now, you never want to put it past a guy like that, but the same vein, you never wanted to put it past a guy like a Clayton Kershaw, and look what happened when he took the mound, late in that game for the Dodgers. I do think sometimes the game just passes you by, and to your point, Luis Castillo is kind of almost one of those fool's gold playoff ERA guys, where if you just look at how he's done in his last couple starts, you're thinking, man, this is the dude to back. But he's an ultimate roller coaster pitcher against a lineup that kind of feels like an ultimate roller coaster, or a lineup that can hit off anybody on any given day. And so, yeah, to your point, through that first 5 innings, I would go ahead and smash that over, because through the first 2 innings, you might even see 5 runs fly off the board there.
Yep, you certainly could, and that's certainly a game where if we can get a 7, much like we've got for game number 3, I'll be most definitely taking a shot on that over, as Rob Donaldson, who does great work with the Rob's Best Bet Show, joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Show. And if the Seattle Mariners are able to withhold this lead and they don't completely blow this series, have to think that they're going to be facing off against the LA Dodgers in the World Series. And what sort of a chance would you give them of being able to knock off the LA Dodgers? Because we mentioned it before, it does feel like they're the most dominant of these 4 teams. And for the Seattle Mariners, it would be quite the feat for them to be able to get there. I just once again go back to it. I do feel like with the LA Dodgers, this is a pretty unstoppable force, and it's their World Series to lose at this point.
And the Mariners, as good as their pitching has been, the Dodgers pitching so far and their utilization in the playoffs has been even better, because when Shohei Ohtani has seemingly been your quote-unquote weak link in the rotation, you're doing something right. And I do think when you're looking at it from that potential optics of Dodgers versus Mariners, the Mariners offense is much more of a roller coaster than the Dodgers side. The pitching has also kind of been more consistent on the Dodgers side in this playoff cycle. And so it almost kind of feels like no matter what angle you're picking from, it feels like the pocket that somehow the Mariners would need to find themselves within is, can this offense from the previous 2 games against the Blue Jays, carry over to a guy like a Blake Snell, a guy like a Tyler Glasnow, get after a Yamamoto. If it can, and they can finally muster that up, and again, they're up against it with that sort of framework, that's really the only key to victory and way to victory that I kind of see them getting in terms of World Series. And so it does almost kind of feel like it's the Dodgers versus everybody else, or ahead of everybody else. And maybe the Blue Jays are the team that I would kind of designate them as potentially being able to knock them off, just because their offense is probably the second most consistent in the field of play right now.
Yep, and post All-Star break, the Blue Jays have the most runs per game of any team in the big league, so they do come in good form, though. They got cooled down at home the last few days, so we'll see if they're going to be able to bounce back there. And with regards to this postseason, are there any bets that you're placing right now that are a little bit different than they would be during the regular season? Because as we know, every pitch, every single at-bat, all of that, they always have the cliches. It all becomes a little bit more meaningful. Has that changed the way that you bet at all, or do you just keep things relatively the way that it is during the regular season, game to game, and pretty consistent with that regard?
Well, I think what we've learned over the years is don't get too enamored with the young pitcher pitching well. And so, the other day I faded a guy like a Yesavich who looked very, very good, or Yesavich when he was playing against the Yankees. And obviously the first game against the Mariners, they hang 10 runs, and he was kind of the one that got shelled in that matchup. I think when you are looking at it from that dynamic, even a guy like a Yamamoto, who's making his first ever starts within this kind of framework of high pressure scenarios this late in the series and consistently throughout the year, it feels like sometimes the lights get a little bit too bright for these types of guys. And so I do think you can kind of pick your spots. We saw it with Cam Schlittler with the Yankees as well. He had a really good game. Well, he had a game where he got at least tagged up a little bit. And sometimes when you do see those big names that have that big game, do not be afraid to fade them the next time out, because playoff pressure is real. They're getting every single lineup's best effort every single night when these games are so meaningful. And so from that standpoint, 100% this time of year, you have to go against those kind of pitchers who are quote unquote riding the hot streak. And I think it does pay dividends in the long run when you're talking about the playoff cycle.
They are getting the best effort night in and night out, and every single time you're on this podcast, Rob, we always get your best effort because you're doing an incredible job taking a look at this great game of baseball. Every single time you're on, you lend such great insights, so let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Well, hey, Greg, I love talking ball with you, my man, and I've enjoyed it all season long. And for those who want to follow my Major League Baseball bets as we kind of wind down the season here, Twitter/X at RobDFB, and also on my YouTube channel, which is just my name, Rob Donaldson. But as always, Greg, I appreciate having me on, my man.
It is always great to be able to get Rob aboard every single time he joins me. He lends such incredible insights. He did so once again today. So big thanks to Rob for joining me on the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis for Game 3 of Mariners versus Blue Jays as we touch them all.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. When you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself, talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball, this is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by Rob Donaldson. He does such great work with the show/podcast, Rob's Best Bets. Every single time he joins me, he lends such amazing insights, and he did so once again today. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis for Game 3 of Blue Jays versus Mariners as we touch them all.
If a game is listed on the betting board, Greg has a side and a total on it, so it is time to touch them all.
Do note that as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at gunit_81. Well, it is very easy to go in Las Vegas rotation order because there is one game on the betting board. So how about if we do dive in on 9:53, 9:54 with the Blue Jays on the road against the Mariners? George Kirby is going to be going for Seattle. Shane Bieber has a fever for getting outs for Toronto. Total on this game is 7. The under is between -115 to a -120. Over is between even a -105. Seattle's between a -120 to a -135 favorite, and between +114 to a +118. Then over on Toronto, I'm willing to lay up to a -133 with the Mariners on the money line. I rolled with them. With George Kirby, I recognize that the ERA has not necessarily been like super duper stunning this year, but he has been a whole heck of a lot better when he has been at home rather than on the road, which that makes sense because, well, when you go to Seattle, it's a very, very pitcher-friendly ballpark. Kirby for the season, a 4.10 ERA, despite getting a career high 10 strikeouts per 9 innings between the regular season and the postseason. The 337 fielding independent with only giving up 1.1 home runs, 2.2 walks per 9 innings speaks of positivity, and he's got a 3.29 ERA at home. Meanwhile, for Bieber, he's had his struggles as he has posted up between the regular season and the postseason a 3.77 ERA, only giving up about 2 walks per 9 innings, but 1.5 home runs per 9 innings. And this Seattle team, I recognize that once again they're playing in a quite pitcher-friendly ballpark, especially this time of year. But when you've got big jumper Cal Raleigh, who's been able to give you 62 home runs between the regular season and the postseason, and Eugenio Suarez, who I recognize that he's not hitting for like any average whatsoever, but 50-plus homers between the regular season and the postseason as well. That's some firepower, and you've got plenty of guys that do move the line for the team. Randy Arozarena between the regular season and the postseason over a 3.25 on base. You've had Ori Polanco be able to give you 3 home runs. He's hitting over 250 for the season. Julio Rodriguez has been a little bit up and down with the average in the postseason, but he's got 2 home runs here in the playoffs. J.P. Crawford, all throughout the season, was giving you about a 350 on base as well. So you've got good balance. Tom Canzone has been very good all throughout the season, though he's had his postseason struggles for the Blue Jays. If you take a look at them from the back half of the regular season since the All-Star break into the postseason, they're averaging 5.5 runs per game. That is number 1 in all of baseball, and you've had Vlager Jr. really be able to bust out here. He only had 23 home runs during the regular season, 3 already here in the postseason, and then Dylan Varsho, George Springer, Alejandro Kirk, don't call his name, all have 2 home runs here in the playoffs. Obviously got cooled down with only a combined 4 runs in Toronto in those 2 games, but still, you've had Nathan Lukes do a nice job of finding a way on. He's hitting a 400 here in the postseason. That'll probably cool down a little bit, but he and Ernie Clement have done a nice job finding a way on base. It is a Blue Jays bullpen, though, that they've had their issues. They've been in the bottom half of the big leagues in terms of VRA really ever since the All-Star break. You've had quite a few of these guys just not necessarily perform here in the postseason. Uriel Rodriguez has given up a few runs, and if you look at him since the All-Star break, he's got north of 350 ERA. Brandon Little, Braden Fisher have been really your main constants for this team, but with Braden Fisher, he's already given up 3 earned runs here in the postseason as well, so that's a little bit of an issue for you. Tommy Nance, he's been relatively solid in this bullpen, but he's acting up a bit as well, and for the Seattle Mariners, I just feel better about this bullpen with the likes of Andres Munoz, Matt Brash, who have been able to give you a sub-225 ERA throughout the season. Edward Bazardo, along with Gabe Spire, have been really good in this bullpen as well, and I do think that for Shane Bieber, he just gives up a little bit too much of the deep ball. George Kirby, always very good with his command. That should be able to take him deep in this game. So I did set my total 7.1 at the 7. I'm in on the over. And I do like the money line here of the Mariners up to a -133. And that'll wrap things up for the Wednesday edition of the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. A big thanks to our guy, Rob Donaldson, for joining me in the last segment. If you do like hearing from his fine podcast, Baseball Betting Show, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we'll fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letter CM, the name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I am with you guys every single day on this podcast, all throughout the postseason. Might take a day or 2 off when we do have that long lull between the championship series to the World Series, days. But if we've got games on that day, you're going to be getting a fresh podcast. So I'll be back with you guys once again tomorrow. Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.